Here, we'll work with the Curvature Tool, which is similar to the Pen Tool, but is more intuitive and dynamic. And we'll use the Curvature Tool to draw the stems of these flowers and plants alongside the swan. So my Tools panel, I'll select the Curvature Tool, which is right next to the Pen Tool. And it's got kind of a little curvy line at the end of the Pen Tool. In the Properties panel, for the fill color, I'm going to select None. And for the stroke color, I want that swatch that's named Plant Green. And I want the stroke weight to be 3 points. Now I'm going to start with the first stem to the right of the swan, and I'm going to click at point A. Just click to set an anchor point. And then I'll click at point B. And it creates what looks to be a straight line, but notice when I move my cursor around how it's going to curve when I click the next point. So instead of clicking at C, I'm going to go up to point D and click. And notice how the line has curved between all of those points. And I could go on and click other areas to change the curve. However, I'm going to move my cursor along that path, and when I see a plus sign by the cursor, I'm going to click to add an anchor point near where C is, and then I'm just going to click, hold, and drag it over to C. And notice how the curve changed to a line between those anchor points. So that's a kind of an easier way to draw a curve like that. I'll just press the Escape key to exit the Curvature Tool, and I'll deselect the path. So that's a little bit easier way to draw a curve like that rather than using the Pen Tool. I'll get my Curvature Tool again. I'll click at A to set the anchor point, click at B to start the curve. I'll skip C, click D, and then along that path, I'll click on that path when I see the plus sign and move the anchor point to C. And I'll press the Escape key to exit the Curvature Tool. I'll deselect that, get the Curvature Tool again, and I'll use it to do the same thing on the stem on the left. Click A to set the anchor point, click B, skip C, click D, and add an anchor point and drag it over to C. So this is a little bit easier way to draw curves like this rather than using the Pen Tool, which can be a little bit more cumbersome and less intuitive. So there we've got the stems of our plants. I'm going to select the Artboard 2, which is named Leaf, and we're going to use the Curvature Tool to draw that leaf. So I'll get my Curvature Tool, and I'll click the blue point that's labeled A. That sets the anchor point. Then I'll click over at B. Now if I move my cursor away, you can see how the curve is going to respond. Just like the Pen Tool, we can change the direction of the anchor point, and I want to change it so that it's a corner point. So I'm going to move my cursor over to B, and when I see a change in the cursor, I'm going to double click that anchor point to change it to a corner point. You can now see that it's a straight line, and I'm going the opposite direction. I'm going to click at point C. You can see how the path is going to change. Now point D also needs to be a corner point. So I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key and then click, and that automatically will turn that into a corner point. You can see I can now go the other direction. I want to move the anchor point at C up a little bit, and notice how I can kind of move it up, align it with that curve on the right hand side. I'll add another anchor point somewhere in the middle and click and hold and drag down, and then just click and move the anchor points as I need to. Now I'm going to close the path, and when I see the cursor change to a circle there by it, I'm going to click to close that path. And then I think I'll add another anchor point over here between B and A and drag it over a little bit so that it aligns better with the template. So there's a nice leaf shape. And that was a little bit easier maybe than using the pen tool. So I'll select the leaf shape with the selection tool, and I'll open up the properties panel. Well, actually, first I'll resize it. So I'll click one of those corner bounding box points, and I'll hold down my Shift key and drag inward to reduce the size of the leaf. Now I'll click the fill box and fill it with that plant green. While it's still selected, that leaf shape, I'm going to go up to Object, over to Transform, and then down to Transform Each. And in the dialog box, in the Options area, I want to make sure that Reflect X is checked. And in the reference point indicator, I want to make sure that that far right middle box is checked. I'm going to click Preview. That shows me what it's going to look like. And I'll click Copy to make a copy of it. So it looks kind of like a little mustache, but it's two leaves. I'll select both of those leaf shapes. And in the Properties panel, I can just click the Group button. And now I'll fit all of the artboards in the window. I'll close the Properties panel. And I'll move those leaves over to one of the stems right at the top. And then while it's still selected, I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key to copy it. And notice the change in the cursor when I do that. And I'll drag it over to the next stem. And I'm going to hover my cursor over the corner of one of those bounding box control points. And just, when I see the curved shape to the cursor, I'll just click, hold, and drag it around. I'll do the same to the other. Hold down the Alt or Option key to copy it, and then move my cursor over to one of the corner of the bounding box to move it into shape. So there's some work with the Curvature tool and some copying and transforming objects. The Curvature tool can be a little bit easier to use when drawing certain kinds of shapes than the pen tool.